My nephew called me dad last night, and no one will ever know how deeply it broke me. For 4 years, I've been raising this little boy as my own, fighting every day to give him the love and stability that his real parents never could. But in that quiet moment, when he whispered those 3 letters against my chest, I felt something break inside me. I'm Garrett. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how a broken family led to the most beautiful moment of my life, and why it's also the most heartbreaking thing I'll ever experience. It wasn't supposed to be this way. 4 years ago, I was just a guy with a decent job at a software company in Denver, living in a small 1-bedroom apartment, trying to figure out my own life. I had plans, maybe travel a bit, save up for a house, eventually meet someone special. Normal 24-year-old stuff, you know? But life has this way of throwing you curveballs when you least expect them. My sister Rochelle was always the wild one in our family, 3 years older than me. She was the kind of person who lived life on the edge, sometimes in exciting ways, but more often in dangerous ones. She'd been struggling with addiction since she was 18, and despite our family's attempts to help her, she kept spiraling deeper into a world that scared the rest of us. Our parents had tried everything: rehab, interventions, tough love, unconditional support. Nothing seemed to stick. Growing up, Rochelle had been my protector. When kids at school picked on me for being too quiet or too into computers, she'd stand up for me. She taught me how to throw a punch, how to stand my ground, how to never let anyone make me feel small. But somewhere along the way, she started fighting battles she couldn't win. First, it was just drinking at parties in high school. Then, it escalated to harder stuff in college. By the time she dropped out junior year, she was already too deep in to find her way back easily. Our parents blamed themselves. Of course, Dad would stay up late wondering where they went wrong, why his bright, fierce daughter had chosen this path. Mom would cry when she thought no one was looking, especially after Rochelle would call asking for money or show up at 3 in the morning looking like she hadn't slept in days. I was away at college during the worst of it, and I'll be honest, I was relieved to have distance from the chaos. I loved my sister, but watching her destroy herself was killing our whole family. I threw myself into my studies, got my computer science degree, landed a good job, and tried to build a life that felt stable and predictable. Everything Rochelle's life wasn't. When Rochelle got pregnant at 26, we all hoped it would be the wake-up call she needed. For a few months, it seemed like it was working. She cleaned up, went to prenatal appointments, even moved back in with our parents. She'd call me excited about baby names and nursery themes, sounding more like the sister I remembered from childhood than she had in years. "I'm going to be different for this baby," she told me over the phone one evening. I was at my apartment in Denver. She was at Mom and Dad's house in Colorado Springs. "This is my chance to get it right, Garrett. To be the person I was supposed to be." I wanted to believe her. We all did. But addiction isn't something you overcome just because you want to badly enough. Babies don't fix broken people, and by the time little Phoenix was born, Rochelle was already slipping back into old patterns. The father, some guy named Holden who disappeared the moment he found out about the pregnancy, was never in the picture. We never even met him. All I knew was that Rochelle had met him at some party, they'd had a brief thing, and when she told him she was pregnant, he basically vanished. Changed his number, moved out of his apartment, just gone. Rochelle would just shrug whenever we asked about him, like he was just another mistake she'd rather forget. Maybe he was. For the first 3 years of Phoenix's life, it was chaos. Rochelle would disappear for days, sometimes weeks, leaving our parents to care for the baby. They were in their early 60s then, and while they loved Phoenix fiercely, they weren't prepared to be full-time parents again. Dad had just had a minor heart attack the year before, and Mom was dealing with her own health issues. But they did it anyway, because what choice did they have? They'd feed him, change him, rock him to sleep, all while worrying about where their daughter was and whether she was alive or dead. Then Rochelle would show up out of nowhere, demanding her son back, promising she'd changed, that this time would be different. The cycle repeated over and over until our parents were physically and emotionally exhausted. I tried to help when I could, driving down from Denver on weekends to give them a break. Phoenix was this bright, curious toddler who seemed remarkably resilient despite the chaos surrounding him. He'd light up when I walked in, running to me with his arms outstretched, chattering about his toys or the birds outside the window. "Uncle Gary, Uncle Gary." He'd shout he couldn't quite manage Garrett yet. Those visits became the highlight of my weeks. I'd take him to the park, read him books, help with bath time. For a few hours, I could pretend we were just a normal family with normal problems. But I always had to leave, and I always felt guilty about it. I'd see the exhaustion in my parents' eyes, the way they'd aged years in just months. I'd watch Phoenix wave goodbye from the window, not understanding why Uncle Gary couldn't stay forever. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in March. I was at work when my phone rang. Mom, hysterical, barely able to speak through her tears. They took him, she sobbed. Child Protective Services came and took Phoenix. They found Rochelle passed out in some drug house with him, in the same room. There were needles on the floor, Garrett. Needles where our baby could have picked them up. I felt like the world stopped spinning. Where is he now? Emergency foster placement. They said we can't take him because we're too old and Dad's heart condition makes us unsuitable for emergency custody. They need someone younger, someone with a stable living situation. That's when she asked the question that changed my life forever. Garrett, I know it's a lot to ask, but you're his best chance. You have a stable job, your own place. They said if a family member can take him, they'll consider placement with you. Would you, could you, I didn't even let her finish. I'll be there tomorrow. The next 48 hours were a blur of paperwork, background checks, and interviews with social workers. I took emergency leave from work and drove straight to Colorado Springs. My tiny one-bedroom apartment suddenly felt even smaller as I tried to figure out how to transform it into a home suitable for a 3-year-old. I spent that first night shopping for everything a child might need: a toddler bed, car seat, high chair, toys, clothes, books. I child-proofed everything I could think of: outlet covers, cabinet locks, corner guards. I cleared out half my closet and dresser to make room for his things. I bought a small bookshelf and filled it with picture books. I hung glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling above where his bed would go. When I first met with the CPS caseworker, a stern woman named Mrs. Patterson, she was very clear about the situation. "This is temporary placement, Mr. Garrett," she said, reviewing my file across her cluttered desk. "The goal is always reunification with the biological parent when possible. Your sister will have opportunities to complete programs and regain custody if she can demonstrate stability and sobriety for an extended period." I nodded, but inside I was already thinking about Phoenix's future, not Rochelle's rehabilitation timeline. I'd been watching this cycle for 3 years. The promises, the relapses, the broken hearts. I wasn't optimistic about reunification, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted it anymore. Not after what had happened. "What does that timeline look like?" I asked. "It varies. Could be 6 months, could be 2 years. Depends on her progress in the programs and her ability to maintain sobriety. In the meantime, you'll have regular check-ins with our office. And Phoenix will need to attend counseling to help him process the trauma and instability he's experienced." Trauma. The word hit me hard. This sweet, innocent little boy had experienced trauma before he was even old enough to understand what was happening to him. The day I picked him up from the temporary foster home, he was so small and quiet. The foster family seemed nice enough, an older couple who specialized in emergency placements, but it was clear. Phoenix had been scared and confused by all the changes in his young life. He clutched a worn stuffed tiger that Mom had given him when he was born, apparently his only constant companion through all the upheaval. "Are you my daddy now?" he asked in the tiniest voice as I buckled him into the car seat I'd just installed that morning. My heart broke a little. "I'm your Uncle Garrett, remember? We met a few times at Grandma and Grandpa's house. We're going to live together for a while." He just nodded and hugged his tiger tighter. "Where's Mommy?" That was the first of thousands of difficult questions I'd have to answer over the next 4 years. How do you explain addiction to a 3-year-old? How do you tell a child that his mother loves him but can't take care of him right now? How do you provide comfort without making promises you can't keep? "Mommy is sick and needs to get better," I said, which was true enough. "But you're going to stay with me, and I'm going to take really good care of you." The drive back to Denver felt like the longest 2 hours of my life. Phoenix barely spoke, just stared out the window and occasionally whispered to his tiger. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, wondering what he was thinking, what he was feeling. What kind of damage had already been done to his young psyche? Those first few weeks were the hardest thing I'd ever done. I knew nothing about taking care of a 3. I had to learn everything from scratch: what foods he liked, how to handle tantrums, the specific bedtime routine that would help him feel safe enough to sleep. He needed his tiger positioned just so, a nightlight in the hallway, and at least 3 books read aloud before he could settle down. The nights were the worst. Phoenix would wake up crying, calling for his mommy or his grandma, confused about where he was. I'd sit by his bed rubbing his back, singing lullabies I half remembered from my own childhood, feeling completely out of my depth. But slowly, gradually, we found our rhythm. I rearranged my work schedule to accommodate his needs. I'd wake up at 6 to make him breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast cut into triangles, the way he liked it. I'd drop him off at daycare on my way to work, and I was always the first parent there at pickup time. Evenings were for dinner, baths that involved more water on the floor than in the tub, and story time that sometimes stretched for an hour because he wanted just one more book. Weekends became our time to explore. We'd go to the Denver Zoo, where Phoenix was fascinated by the elephants and terrified of the snakes. We'd visit the Children's Museum, where he could touch everything and ask endless questions. We'd find hiking trails that were easy enough for little legs, and I'd carry him on my shoulders when he got tired. Slowly, Phoenix began to relax. The nightmares became less frequent. He started laughing more, playing more freely. He made friends at daycare and would chatter excitedly about his day during our drives home. He began to trust that I'd be there when I said I would, that our routine was stable, that this new life wasn't going to disappear overnight. Rochelle would visit sometimes, when she was clean enough to pass the supervised visitation requirements. Those visits were always hard to watch. Phoenix would light up when he saw her, running to hug her legs and chattering excitedly about his week. He'd show her his artwork from daycare, tell her about his friends, ask when she was coming home. Soon, baby, she'd promise, and I could see she meant it in the moment. Mommy's getting better, and then we'll be together again. But I could also see the confusion in his eyes when she'd leave again. The way he'd stand at the window watching her car disappear, not understanding why Mommy couldn't just stay. The questions that would come later: where did she go? When is she coming back? Why can't I go with her? As months turned into a year, then 2 years, the visits became less frequent. Rochelle would complete part of a treatment program, then relapse. She'd show up for a few supervised visits, then disappear for weeks or months at a time. The social workers became more pessimistic about reunification. But they couldn't officially terminate her parental rights without clear evidence of abandonment or Phoenix being in immediate danger. Meanwhile, Phoenix was thriving. He started pre-K and made friends easily. His vocabulary exploded, and he became this curious, energetic little boy who asked a million questions about everything. He'd bring me drawings from school with stick figures labeled me and Uncle Garrett, and my heart would swell every time. He learned to ride a bike in the parking lot behind our apartment building. I ran alongside him, one hand on the seat, until that magical moment when I realized I'd let go and he was pedaling on his own. He was so proud he wanted to call everyone we knew to tell them about it. He lost his first tooth eating an apple at breakfast one morning. The tooth fairy left him $2 and a note praising his bravery. He kept that note in his treasure box for months. He learned to swim at the community center, going from terrified of putting his face in the water to doing cannonballs off the diving board in just one summer. All these milestones, all these firsts, I was there for every single one. Not Rochelle, not Holden, not even our parents most of the time, because of the distance and their health issues. Just me, documenting everything with photos and videos, cheering him on, being his biggest supporter and his safe place to land. But he never forgot about his mom, even as her presence in his life became more sporadic. He'd still make Mother's Day cards at school, even though she missed more visits than she made. He'd ask about her randomly at bedtime, in the car, during dinner. Always with hope in his voice, always believing that next time would be different. The hardest part was explaining why she couldn't come to his pre-K graduation, or his 5th birthday party, or any of the little milestones that seemed so important to him. I learned to deflect without lying, to comfort him without making promises I couldn't keep. Uncle Garrett, he asked one night as I was tucking him in. He was 4 then, and his vocabulary had expanded enough to ask more complex questions. Why doesn't Mommy live with us? I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes grown-ups get sick in a way that makes it hard for them to take care of kids the way they want to. Your mommy loves you so much, but she needs to get better first. Like when I had the flu and couldn't go to school, sort of like that, but it takes longer to get better. Are you sick too? He asked, his eyes wide with worry. No, buddy, I'm not sick. I'm going to be here to take care of you, promise, promise. That promise became my anchor through everything that followed. When Rochelle relapsed again after 6 months of sobriety and missed another 6 months of visits, when CPS caseworkers changed and I had to explain our situation over and over to new people who didn't understand our family dynamic, when well-meaning relatives would ask if I was ready to get my life back once Rochelle got clean, as if caring for Phoenix was some temporary inconvenience rather than the most important thing I'd ever done. When nights felt long and I wondered if I was doing enough, being enough. For this little boy who deserved so much more than the cards he'd been dealt. By Phoenix's 6th birthday, Rochelle had been absent for almost 8 months. No visits, no phone calls, no contact with CP. The social workers started talking about terminating her parental rights and making my guardianship permanent. Part of me was relieved it would give Phoenix the stability he needed and deserved. But another part of me was heartbroken for him, knowing that this decision would fundamentally change his understanding of his family. I threw him a big birthday party that year, inviting all his friends from school and their parents. We had it at a local park with games and face painting and a bounce house. Phoenix was in heaven, running around with his friends, his face painted like a superhero, absolutely glowing with happiness. But I noticed him looking toward the parking lot periodically, and I knew he was hoping Rochelle would show up. She'd promised to come during her last phone call 3 weeks earlier, but I'd learned not to count on her promises anymore. When it was time to open presents, Phoenix saved one chair empty next to him. "That's for Mommy," he told me quietly, "in case she comes." She didn't come. And watching his face fall as the party wound down, and she still hadn't appeared, was one of the hardest things I'd ever witnessed. That night, as I was cleaning up the wrapping paper and leftover cake, I made a decision. I couldn't keep letting her hurt him with broken promises and missed occasions. I had to protect him, even if it meant protecting him from his own mother. I called Mrs. Patterson the next morning and told her I wanted to pursue termination of parental rights. The legal process took months. Lawyers, court dates, psychological evaluations, home visits. Phoenix didn't understand most of it, but he could sense that something important was happening. He became more clingy, more anxious about me leaving for work or going out without him. "You're not going away like Mommy, are you?" he asked one morning as I was getting ready for a court hearing. I knelt down to his level, looking him in the eyes. "I'm never going anywhere, Phoenix, never." The hardest part was that Rochelle fought it. She showed up to court, clean and sober for the first time in months, with a lawyer and a treatment plan and promises that this time was different. She cried on the witness stand, talking about how much she loved her son, how she was finally ready to be the mother he deserved. For a moment, I almost believed her, almost felt guilty for what I was doing. But then I thought about all the broken promises, all the missed visits, all the times Phoenix had waited by the window for someone who never came. I thought about the stability he'd found with me, the happiness he discovered when he wasn't constantly wondering if his world was about to change again. When the judge finally signed the papers granting me permanent guardianship, I felt relief and grief in equal measure. Relief that Phoenix would have security, that he wouldn't have to worry about being moved again or visiting a mother who might or might not show up. Grief for the mother he'd lost, for the simpler family structure he'd never have, for the questions he'd carry with him as he grew up. But Phoenix seemed to take it in stride, the way kids do. He was 6 then, starting 1st grade, and his world revolved around Pokemon cards, soccer practice, and whether we could get ice cream after dinner. He still asked about his mom sometimes, but less frequently, and with less urgency. "Is Mommy better now?" he asked one day out of the blue as we were driving to soccer practice. "I don't know, buddy, but you're safe with me, and that's what matters." "Will I see her again?" "Maybe someday, when you're older, if you want to." He nodded and went back to looking at his Pokemon cards, seemingly satisfied with that answer. It was around this time that I started noticing subtle changes in how he related to me. He'd always been affectionate, but now he seemed to look to me for everything: permission, comfort, guidance, celebration. When he skinned his knee, he ran to me. When he had a nightmare, he climbed into my bed. When he was proud of something at school, I was the first person he wanted to tell. The shift was so gradual, I almost didn't notice it happening. Until last month, when his teacher mentioned that Phoenix had been talking about his dad during share time. "I think there might be some confusion," Mrs. Whitmore said gently during parent-teacher conferences. "Phoenix talks about you as his father quite often, but I have him listed as living with his uncle in his file." I felt my chest tighten. "No, that's correct. I'm his uncle, his guardian. I'll talk to him about it," but when I brought it up with Phoenix that night, he just looked confused. "I know your Uncle Garrett," he said, matter-of-factly, as we sat at the kitchen table working on his homework. "But Tommy at school says that the person who takes care of you and loves you and lives with you is your dad. And that's you." I didn't know how to respond to that. How do you explain to a 6-year-old the difference between biological relationships and chosen families? How do you honor the truth without diminishing the love? "Well," I said carefully, "I am your uncle, and I do take care of you and love you, but your daddy is someone else, even though he's not here right now." Phoenix nodded like this made perfect sense to him, but I could see he was still processing it. "But what if I want you to be my dad instead?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. Why would you want that? Because you're here, and you make me breakfast and help with my homework and come to my soccer games. Tommy's dad does those things too. Over the next few weeks, I noticed he was testing out different ways of referring to me. Sometimes I was Uncle Garrett. Sometimes I was just Garrett. Once, tentatively, he called me Dad while asking for help reaching something on a high shelf, then looked at me like he was waiting to see if I'd correct him. I didn't know what to do. Every parenting book I'd read said to be honest with kids about their family structure, to not confuse them about biological relationships, but none of those books addressed situations like ours, where the lines between family roles had blurred beyond recognition. The truth was, I felt like his father. I was the one who worried about his fever in the middle of the night. I was the one who cheered at his soccer games and helped with homework and taught him how to ride a bike. I was the one who knew that he liked his sandwiches cut diagonally, and that he was afraid of the vacuum cleaner but loved thunderstorms. In every way that mattered, except biology, I was his dad. But I also knew that claiming that role felt like a betrayal of the truth, and potentially of Rochelle and Holden, wherever they were. Phoenix had a father out there somewhere, Holden, who'd never even met him, and a mother who loved him even if she couldn't care for him. Who was I to rewrite his family's story? These thoughts were swirling through my mind last night as we settled in for our usual Friday movie night. We'd ordered pizza, half pepperoni for him, half veggie for me, and built a fort out of couch cushions in the living room. Phoenix had chosen some animated movie about talking cars, and we were curled up together under our favorite blanket, his head resting against my chest. Uncle Garrett. He said about halfway through the movie, "Yeah, buddy, are you happy that I live with you?" The question surprised me. Of course I am. Why would you ask that? Because sometimes grown-ups seem sad when they have to take care of kids. Like Mrs. Henderson next door always looks tired when her grandkids visit. I pulled him closer. I'm not sad, Phoenix. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. Really? Really? I can't imagine my life without you in it. He smiled and snuggled deeper into my side. I can't imagine my life without you either. We went back to watching the movie, but I could feel him getting drowsier as the evening went on. This was pretty normal. Friday nights often ended with him falling asleep on the couch and me carrying him to his bed. I was just enjoying the peaceful moment, listening to the sound of his breathing, and feeling grateful for these simple, perfect moments that had become the foundation of our life together. That's when it happened. Just as he was falling asleep, Phoenix shifted slightly and mumbled something into my shirt. At first I thought he was just making sleepy noises, but then I heard it clearly. "Love you, Dad." 3 words, barely whispered, probably said without conscious thought as he drifted between waking and sleeping. But they hit me like a physical blow. I froze, not wanting to wake him up, not wanting to break the spell of the moment. But, inside, I was falling apart. 4 years of love and fear and hope and worry all crashed over me at once. 4 years of wondering if I was enough, if I was doing right by him, if this makeshift family we'd built was really what he needed. And in that moment, I knew that it was. I stayed perfectly still as tears rolled down my cheeks, holding this little boy who had somehow become my whole world. The kid who wasn't mine by blood, but was mine in every other way. The nephew who had taught me what unconditional love really meant. I thought about all the firsts I'd been there for: first day of school, first lost tooth, first time riding a bike without training wheels, first soccer goal, first time reading a whole book by himself. I thought about all the nights I'd sat by his bed when he was sick, all the games of catch in the backyard, all the bedtime stories and goodnight hugs. I thought about how he'd changed me from a guy who barely knew what he wanted from life into a man who would fight the world to protect this one small person. But I also thought about the complexity of our situation, how Phoenix might feel when he's older and understands more about why his mom couldn't take care of him, how he might want to find Holden someday, to understand that part of his story, how he might resent me for letting him call me Dad when I wasn't, biologically speaking, his father. Yet sitting there in the dark, feeling his warm weight against my chest, listening to his steady breathing, I couldn't bring myself to regret that he felt safe enough, loved enough, to call me Dad in his most vulnerable moment. After about 20 minutes, I carefully picked him up and carried him to his room. He stirred slightly as I tucked him into bed, but didn't wake up. I positioned his tiger just how he liked it, turned on his nightlight, and kissed his forehead. "Sweet dreams, buddy," I whispered. As I turned to leave, he mumbled sleepily, "Night, Uncle Garrett." And there it was, the return to our normal dynamic. Like those 3 words in the living room had been a glimpse into some alternate reality where things were simpler, where love was the only thing that mattered in defining family. I've been thinking about it all day today. About what it means to be a father versus what it means to be a dad. about biology versus choice, about the family you're born into versus the family you create, about whether I have the right to accept that title, even if it's freely given by the person who matters most. I know that Phoenix will have questions as he gets older. He'll want to understand why his mom couldn't take care of him, why his biological father was never around. He might go through phases where he's angry about it, where he wishes his story was different. He might want to seek them out, to understand those missing pieces of himself. And if that day comes, I'll support him through it, even if it hurts. Even if it means sharing him with people who gave him life but couldn't give him stability. Because that's what you do when you love someone, you put their needs above your own fears. But for now, in this moment, I'm holding on to the gift he gave me last night. For a few seconds, in the safety of sleep and love, I got to be his dad. Not his uncle who stepped up when everyone else stepped out, not his guardian who navigated legal systems and social workers, just his dad, in the purest, simplest sense of the word. I know that officially, legally, biologically, I'll always be Uncle Garrett, and that's okay. That role comes with its own kind of love, its own importance. But last night, a sleepy 7-year-old boy gave me a glimpse of something else entirely. A relationship defined not by legal documents or DNA tests, but by thousands of small moments of care and protection and love. Nobody else will understand why those 3 words broke me the way they did. They'll see a sweet moment between an uncle and his nephew, a child expressing gratitude for good care. But for me, it was validation of something I've felt but never dared to claim. For just a moment, I wasn't just the guy who stepped up when Phoenix needed someone, I was his dad. And that changes everything and nothing at all. Tomorrow, we'll go back to our normal routine. I'll make him pancakes for breakfast, his favorite Saturday morning tradition, and take him to soccer practice. He'll probably call me Uncle Garrett, and I'll respond the way I always do, with patience and love, and the deep satisfaction that comes from watching him grow into this amazing little person. But I'll also carry last night with me forever. The weight of his trust, the gift of his unconscious honesty, the 3 words that told me everything I needed to know about whether I'm doing this right. Love you, Dad? Yeah, buddy. I love you too.